Good morning. My name is Ben Jacobs, your host for the next 5 days. First and foremost, please engage with our exhibitors on the app. And if you want to see the full schedule, it's available on the app and also our website as well. In addition to that, at the end of the day, we nod to heritage via Soccerex Heritage, and we focus on the 1930 World Cup. That's around 6 o'clock GMT, so please make sure you stick around for that. We get underway with our first panel at noon in half an hour's time. That's called Organised Fun, sort of titled with the kind of words that my parents used to tell me when they wanted me to learn under the pretense of fun. And I suppose that's what we are doing a little bit here on day 2 of Soccerex. We're educating you, but it is fun, I promise you, hence the name of that panel. And our moderator, Jeff Kassouf from the Equalizer, will take you through that in about 30 minutes time. Before all of that, as I said right at the top, we are presented today by Musco Lighting, and as a result of that, we're asking you the following question: who is your shining star in football? There's a catch though, they must be under the age of 21. Give me a name that you think is a hot property in football, male or female, and you will enter the draw to win an amazing signed shirt. You can see the selection via our social media at Soccerex, and if you're successful, picked out of the draw at random at the end of the day, then you can choose one of those signed shirts. Louis Saha, Edwin van der Sar, Jean-Pierre Papin, Laurie Lindsay, all available at the moment. We've got a Deco shirt as well to chuck into the mix as well. So who's your shining star in football? They must be under the age of 21 though. That is the only catch. Engage with us, tweet us via at Soccerex and use that hashtag SoccerXConnected. So what we do every morning before we get underway at noon with that opening panel Organised Fun is we spend about 20 minutes looking back on the day that has just passed, and on top of that, telling you the full schedule in a little bit more detail. And we call this session Soccerex Fast Forward. And to do that, I'm delighted to be joined every single morning over in Eastbourne by Patrick McCreanor, the Head of Sales and Marketing at Soccerex. Patrick, we can go over to you now, I believe. It's a very good morning to you, looking suave as ever. Not sure whether you've changed the jacket, though, from yesterday. Maybe you've just got one sort of smart attire that's going to be repeated all week. But it's great to have your company again. Hope you're staying safe in your virtual studio down south. Yesterday was a big success, wasn't it? I understand that Soccerex had record numbers of delegates for this digital conference.
Yeah, hi, morning, Ben. It was a phenomenal day, actually, exceeding all of our initial expectations for the event, both in terms of delegates, participation, but also countries registered. I think we're now up to 97 countries, which takes us to almost 50% of the world's population country-wise. So, yeah, phenomenal figures. I think the social interaction yesterday was unreal. Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook were all keeping the entire social media team really busy. So I think an 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. Day yesterday, and it will be repeated most of this week, I think.
And we'll look back on yesterday in just a moment, Patrick, and I'll also ask you who your shining star is. So have a little think about that. But before we get into details and look back on some highlights from day 1 of Soccerex Connected, what can we look forward to today?
Well, an action-packed day again. I think looking at Stadia Day, it's one of the things that we spend a lot of time on. I think especially in the current climate, where Stadia is one of the things largely affected, match day operations and revenues and all those sort of things. So some really relevant topics today. We've got a focus on digital ticketing. I think we're all longing for the day when we can finally get that match ticket in our hand again. But I think going forward, it will be a digital platform we'll be using. That session sponsored by Soccerex. We've got, as you mentioned, the AR, VR, what about R? I think looking at how to integrate technology in the correct way when fans are allowed back in the stadiums, I think is really important. And heritage, as you touched on again, looking at the evolution of football stadia from 1930 to the current day, and indeed looking ahead to the World Cup in Qatar in 2022. So again, another really full day of 6-7 hours of content, covering all that's relevant within the stadium operations world. So it should be a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. As Pat mentioned, Qatar 2022 should be the most eco-friendly and digitally innovative World Cup that we have seen. If you've got thoughts on your favourite stadium or those that are perhaps a little bit more innovative and technologically advanced, get in contact with us as well via @Soccerex. I know we've got a number of Tottenham fans listening, and that, of course, is a very advanced stadium as well. And a reminder again that Musco Lighting are our sponsors today. So we're asking you, who is your shining star in football? The only catch is that they must be young, under the age of 21. Pat, putting you on the spot before we start looking at yesterday in a little bit more detail. Who's your shining star?
I think if the question was put to me 6 months ago with the age 21 cut-off, I'd probably say Trent Alexander-Arnold for what he's done by 21. But I think looking away, I think the young player Saka at Arsenal is really one to watch at 18. I think he is, and settled into that side like he's been there for years, and looks a phenomenal talent. If we focus in the UK, I think internationally there are lots to consider. I think Vinicius at Real Madrid has got all the tools to go on and be a phenomenal player, as has Rodrigo. But I think we're seeing a real influx of talent, a different type of footballer, really technical, really quick. But I really like Saka at Arsenal. I would have enjoyed him at Liverpool, I think.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Deadline day has passed as well. So are there any young talents that have moved to your particular club that you're particularly excited by? Get in contact with us again at Soccerex. Use that hashtag SoccerexConnected as well to engage with us on Twitter. Certainly great to have your company. In terms of my own shining star, I'm going to pick from the world of women's football. It's Lauren James, young Manchester United women's striker. She scored an absolute belter, cutting in from the left-hand side and curling a goal into the far right-hand corner in a defeat 2-1 to Chelsea. But she made a real impact off the bench, and I think she's going to end up winning many caps for England. The Lionesses in good shape, even though, of course, Phil Neville has left. So pick from the world of men and women's football. Who's your shining star to stand an opportunity to win that signed shirt on day 2 of Soccerex Connected? So, Pat, let's start looking back on day 1 of Soccerex Connected. As we've already alluded to, we had some stellar names and a number of delegates interacting and engaging with us. What stood out for you?
There were a couple, actually. I think the most engaged panel was the one where we looked at multi-club or multi-sport ownership. And we saw hundreds of questions piling in from social media and also via the Swapcard platform as well. I think there were 2 schools of thought on that about monopolies and domination and those sort of things. But that really did open up lots of dialogue for us, which is what we want. We want this event to be interactive and thought-provoking, and that panel definitely did that. Personally, I loved the VAR panel or the offside rule panel, and it was quite interesting to hear the sort of referee's standpoint from Howard Webb. Did it make me feel sorry for them a little bit? Maybe. But more importantly, I think it at least enabled us to shine a light on their perspective and how they view it, and how they wouldn't remove it now that it's in place. So it was quite interesting to hear those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also heard from the chair of Women in Sport, Ebru Coxall, about equality and how we should level the playing field throughout the course of day 1. We were talking about quotas and at what point we're not going to need any quotas and when the playing field may well be equal. And this is what Ebru Coxall had to say on the topic.
Institutionally, unfortunately, discrimination has continued to exist in the industry for many, many years. It was always seen as an old boys club, and there were very few of us 20 years. I'm very happy to see today there are many, many more women represented at all levels of the game, on the pitch, on the side of the pitch, in the boardroom. And that's been a long journey for most of us. And Women in Football is a network of 4,500 professional women working in and around the game, mainly in the UK, but almost 20% of our membership base is from abroad. And we've been really holding the pulse very quickly with surveys that we do, roundtables, webinars. Especially 2020, through the pandemic, we remained very close to our membership base. And what we keep hearing is, while the landscape is improving for women in the game, there are still some significant obstacles.
That was Ebru Coxall from Women in Football. She is the chair there. And Pat, of course, Soccerex promotes inclusion and diversity constantly as well. There's a good mix, of course, of male and female panelists throughout the conference as well. But I'm sure you'd like to also give a shout out to some of your female heroes working behind the scenes on this specific conference. I know, for example, we've got Rose and Liv, who worked very hard to bring this conference from a paper theoretical to a reality, if you like.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we even had a situation last night at nearly midnight UK time with the platform, and that was solved by Olivia, who looks after a lot of the marketing stuff for us. So yeah, the ladies of Soccerex certainly play a huge part, from Juliana looking after the institutional partners to Fionn, who's been looking after the registrations. Like you mentioned, Rose as well, who's been taking care of the new sort of club liaison division, which has enabled us to improve our numbers from a rights holder perspective of over 1,300, nearly 1,400 rights holders at this particular event. So yeah, we're not the sort of stereotypical old boys club at Soccerex, and even our co-founder Rita is obviously female, so we've got a really nice balance, and I think that enables us to, sometimes when the boys might get a bit carried away with things, it gives us that sort of level-headed approach. But yeah, we're all one team at Soccerex for sure, male or female. They all know their football, but more importantly, they're a crazy hard-working bunch who just want to deliver all the time and help the business any way they can.
Absolutely, well said, Pat. So we're going to move on now to the next highlight from yesterday, and we alluded to this just a few moments ago. It was a fascinating panel about how the offside rule could potentially anger fans and what changes might need to be made to VAR, or maybe even the rules of offside themselves, in order to keep fans on side. And Alexei Lalas was part of this panel. Ben Grossman was involved as well, but one of the foremost voices, particularly providing that insight into the rules and how we define clear and reasonable doubt, which is so key to ultimately technology being able to work effectively with the rhythm of football and offside particularly, which has been so contentious because during the pandemic we've been talking about things like toes and offsides and armpits and offsides more than maybe the goals and the action themselves. And a great voice to give insight for Soccerex, who spoke very eloquent yesterday, was the general manager of the Professional Referees Association, Howard Webb. These were his thoughts on the contentious topic of offside in the context of technology.
There's more damage done to the game when a referee stands there with his finger to his ear or her ear for 3 minutes while people just don't know what's happening. So a lot of the work that we do around the implementation of VAR is about being efficient, as efficient as we can be, understanding that sometimes when you've got to slow things down, if you're going to do this, you've got to do it properly. You can't just do it, half-hearted and just look at certain aspects of the play. Sometimes it can be pretty complicated. So there are times when we need to take our time. But most of the times we can be fairly efficient. We can do all the work in the background without anybody even knowing that's happening. Players go off and celebrate the goal. Please do so. Enjoy the moment. There's a small chance we're going to take it back. And if we take it back, it's because it shouldn't have stood in the first place. But that's not going to happen too often. And at the end of the day, we want to add credibility to the officiating team.
That was Howard Webb there, former Premier League referee, of course. Pat, I thought his last point was really interesting because he was encouraging fans to just celebrate the goal, saying there's only a small chance that things were going to be brought back. But the reality is a little bit different from a fan perspective, at least I think anyway, because once you know there's even that small percentage of doubt that the goal might not stand, it is very difficult to shout and scream and celebrate without first looking towards the referee or the big screen. And it is that element of hesitance, isn't it, that perhaps makes fans a little bit unsure as to when they should start celebrating.
Yeah, I think I touched on it yesterday. It's I was against it in the beginning, from a sort of purist perspective of football being about the moment. And like you say, it does create that bit of doubt or the bit of hesitancy. Can I celebrate this last minute winner? Can I celebrate this equaliser? Did I even notice that potential red card that happened and that now they're checking? So I think, the communication needs to improve between the referees and the audience or the fans, especially once the fans get back in the stadium. I think it's a lot easier if you're watching it on TV, which we all currently are. But I think when we go back in ground, I think it's going to be very difficult to, like Howard said, to go from literally holding your ear, not saying anything, to actually being able to communicate with the fans what's going on. But personally, I'm not a fan, and I think it will take quite a lot of arguing to win me over.
Absolutely. Right, let's move on and hear from Jason Roberts, who also spoke yesterday. He's the Director of Development at CONCACAF. This panel was all about whether the smaller leagues and clubs are going to become too reliant on European football as a result of the pandemic. And Jason Roberts had strong thoughts defending his confederation.
I think we need to accept that it is a global game and that there's room for professional football to grow and thrive. If we're talking about where I currently am in CONCACAF and our 41 different member associations, and for the talent in the region to play in Europe and the more mature markets. And it doesn't necessarily have to be either or. I think we have to think about the challenge that is that area of chance. Can we ensure that it is a meritocracy, that the opportunity is level across the board so the best can really unlock their earning potential if we accept that it is a global game? So in my view, very briefly, it's not necessarily about where that opportunity is unlocked. It's how do we improve the game for the many as opposed to the few.
Jason Roberts there. Send us your thoughts, particularly if you're outside of Europe, as to how your league is functioning during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll bring Patrick McCreanor, Head of Sales and Marketing at Soccerex, back in just a moment to recap the day, because we're getting underway very shortly at noon. So we will start to wrap things up with our review of yesterday now. But just one more clip I want to move to before we conclude this look back, and that is from Francesco Lopez, who is a senior partner and the COO at Capital Football Group. This was a great panel that had the San Francisco 49ers and representation from Leeds United as well, and those two are in a partnership because the 49ers bought another stake for about £50 million in Leeds United. And we were talking about multi-sport ownership and what are some of the benefits and shared learnings, and Francesco Lopez had the following thoughts on this topic.
There are two areas of the business. You have the player development and you have the commercial side. So not every club has the opportunity to develop the commercial side. It depends very much on the location, the facilities, your market, your value, your brand, etc. But for us, it's more important the player development side of the business, building the pathway to develop these players. And this is something you can definitely take advantage now on the different situation, on the situation of the different football leagues and the different football clubs in the world. So yes, I mean, I'm sure there is a lot of different organizations and funds looking at this, investing not only in football clubs, investing in leagues itself. Like you see in the Series A, there is a very advanced negotiations for an investment in the league itself. So if nowadays, if an investor wants to achieve a return for an investment in football, you have to play global. I think the local game is still a good game, but it's not the best and the most efficient way of playing football nowadays. It has to be a global platform.
That was Francesco Lopez there. Pat, it's good, isn't it, to see a perspective not just from football, but the world of NFL, and learn at a conference like Soccerex how other clubs, leagues and federations outside of the world of global football operate. Yeah,
it was really interesting to hear. I think there are, as much as it can be very difficult to nurture both sides of the playing side, if you've got an NFL club or a football club, I think there are lots of things you can learn about performance, about recuperation, injury, recovery, that sort of thing. But commercially, we know what a powerhouse the NFL is, and their interaction with fans and fan engagement is probably the best around the world, and hence why they have people filling stadiums every week and buying subscriptions for TV networks. So I think that the more we can share knowledge-wise, I think the better we can all grow and embrace new practices and better ways of doing things. And I think what we've done at Soccerex is really look at, we've worked with people from the rugby union, from the IOC, from the NFL. I don't think we've had any involvement from any hockey organisations as yet, but potentially. But I think the more information we can share across the board, I think will benefit everybody.
Great stuff, Pat. And just in 30 seconds, because we've run out of time here on Soccerex Connected, fast forward where we look back on the previous day and ahead to the next one. And of course, we're now into day 2. Just tell us what we can expect, or at least some of the flagship headlines as we move into our first panel in about 10 minutes at noon.
Well, I think I touched on my favourites earlier. I think the digital ticketing area is a huge area, one that will involve lots of different ways of delivery, whether that's the organisations that normally sell tickets, or the apps that are behind it, or the technology moving it to the next level. I think finding out how stadiums have coped over the last year or so, especially with the huge loss of matchday revenue, I think will be interesting. And personally, I'm really looking forward to the heritage panel this evening and looking at the evolution of football stadiums. I think we all grew up going to very different football stadiums to the ones that we can attend now, where fans were penned in and shoved in, and we weren't really customers, we were just football fans. And I think now there's a real difference in the way that fans are treated. You sit on nice seats and you buy nice food and nice drinks, and you're treated altogether differently. So I think that'll be a really interesting panel towards the end of the day.
Great stuff. Patrick McCreanor, Head of Sales and Marketing at Soccerex. Thanks for your company. We'll see you again same time tomorrow.
Cheers, Ben. Appreciate it.
So let's move on then. Noon, our first panel gets underway. Grab yourself a cup of coffee. Soccerex Connected. It is presented by Musco Lighting. Our theme is Stadium and Event Operations. And our first panel is called Organise Fun. I'll be back in 10 minutes to give you all the details. Stay with us.